like I said, we'll start with a little bit on Thanksgiving Day, Thanksgiving that is coming next week. Cast down that imagination, how it is foolish and evil and wicked and against the Lord. And we will, I'll touch a little bit on Hanukkah so people know what it is. But I'm going to start here in Isaiah 65 and verse 11. But ye are they that forget the Lord, that forget my holy mountain, that prepare a table for that truth, right? And that furnish the drink offering unto that number, right? So it's talking about setting a feast for that truth. And as you see right here, if you got your 1611, when it says truth, out to the side it says Gad. That is what Thanksgiving is really about. It's about the celebration of the death and destruction of the northern kingdom, specifically the tribe of Gad. All right, that's what Thanksgiving Day is all about. All right, there used to be many Thanksgivings, but Abraham Lincoln in 1863, in the middle of the Civil War, he said, "Look, we need to consolidate all these into one and make it more about peace as opposed to the celebrating of our victories, of our battles over the American Indians." So they decided, okay, we'll just pick the last, or rather the third Thursday in the month of November. We'll call that Thanksgiving, because there used to be many different Thanksgiving days. All right. But at that point, our mind was destroyed. We was willing to accept it. Until these last days when we're starting to wake up out of that BS. But anyway, from there, let's get this here in Deuteronomy 28. And I'm going to jump around a little bit. This is talking about the so-called American Indians, all right? Because India, obviously the people over here are not Indians, clearly, right? So who are they? The tribe of Gad, Israelites, according to the Bible, all right? This is here in Deuteronomy 28, reading verse 15, and then I'm going to jump down. It says, "But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I commanded this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee." So if we didn't keep God's commandments, which none of us did, we didn't persist in the law of the Lord, he said all these curses, all these evil things, all these bad things are going to come upon you, overtake you, right? Going to chase you down, going to inflict themselves upon you, all right? Jumping down to verse 49. "The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth," right? So the colonial powers from Europe, they come from the other side of the world over here unto the Gadites, unto the American Indians, right? It says, "As swift as the eagle flieth," the symbol of America is the bald eagle, all right? And America just went to war with the Gadites, overcome them, all right? "A nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand." And see, this comes to the point of the what they call the original Thanksgiving, right? In Massachusetts, they said, "Oh, and here come the Pilgrims, and they're just so welcoming, and the Indians, oh, they welcomed us in, and we had a peaceful talk, and we sat down and we had dinner together, and Squanto translated it all for us." How did Squanto know English? It's because when the Brits first came over here, and I believe it was the early 1600s, like 1607 or something like that, Tisquantum, which is Squanto's real name, Tisquantum was taken as a slave on a slave ship along with some other Native Americans, right? Israelites of the tribe of Gad, was taken as a slave back to Europe, and they sold him all around Europe. So, and there was a point in time where he got his freedom. All right, whether it be from him working himself free, him buying himself out of whatever, or whether it be a matter of mercy and release, whichever the case. Tisquantum, he traveled all around Europe and he learned English. All right, he went to England and he learned English so that when he came back, he was a translator for the Pilgrims. All right, and these Pilgrims, yeah, they did have that feast with the Wampanoag. All right, but shortly afterwards was war, was King Philip's War, and all that led to the slaughter of the American Indians. Right? So, and notice a pattern. It's a pattern because in Massachusetts was not the only place where this happened. Right? There were disputes from certain people saying, "Oh, well, it happened in Florida first, so technically in 1565 or whatever it was," they said, where the Spanish sat down and had a meal with the what was the tribe? It was some Timuga or Timucuga, something like that, and in Florida, right? And of course that didn't last. With those Reubenites down there in Florida, the Creek family, they they went to war with the Spanish, right? And the British and everybody else, right? So you see how no matter what they initially say, it always ended up with the European settlers betraying those agreements with the American Indians, right? And that is Bible prophecy, as we read here in Deuteronomy 28, where it says, I'm going to read verse 50. A nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. All right. And in the book, what book am I thinking of? I'm thinking of Destruction of the Indies by Bartolome de las Casas. All right. He described how the Spaniards would interact with the natives, and what they would do, they would kill the old people. If you weren't fast enough to get the gold, they would kill you, chop off parts of your body, chop off your nose, your hands, whatever. They would kill you, right? And they would rip up the women who are pregnant, right? They would rip up the child, feed it to the dogs, right? They would do all these wicked things to the old and the young. They didn't care, all right? All the much less the average age adult, right? They would just slaughter them. They did not care, all right? So the Psalms talk about a lot of this as well. I actually do want to stay here in Deuteronomy 28, though. There's stuff we got to read here, but let's jump down to verse 61. 61, and we're going to read down a little bit because what we're doing here in Deuteronomy 28 shows you who the Israelites are by the curses, right? The curses are a sign upon the Israelites, all right? Yes. I'm going to read verse 61, Deuteronomy 28, verse 61. Also, every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, them will the Lord bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. All right, so every sickness that's not written in the Bible. Typhus is not in the Bible. Influenza is not in the Bible. Smallpox is not in the Bible. Yet these are what wiped out the so-called American Indians, right? That's what they'll tell you is if you read, of course, later down the line they had like smallpox blankets or whatever, the disease blankets that they would pass out. But initially, the Brits and the other European colonists would just show up, and they would notice after not too long, they might have some battles or whatever, but they noticed that what was mainly wiping out the American Indians was the diseases that they brought. All right, that's something that they had no control of. All right, so why is it here in the Bible? Verse 62, and ye shall be left few in number, whereas you were as the stars of heaven for multitude, because thou wouldest not obey the voice of the Lord thy God. See, if that ain't talking about the American Indians, I don't know who is talking about. All right, because it said, you are as the stars of heaven for multitude. 500 nations is what they say, right? Now it's less than 1% of the population. All right, verse 63. And it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught. And ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. Right? So God said, look, I'm going to give you this land over here. I'm going to give you the best part. That's what he said about Gad. We might get to that later. He said, I'm going to give you the best part of the land over here. And I will multiply you and rejoice over you as long as you keep in my commandments. But whenever you stop keeping my commandments, I'm going to bring you to naught. I'm going to bring you down to nothing. I'm going to destroy you, and I'm going to take you out of the land. I'm going to take you off the land, right? So we saw how that Bible prophecy came to pass. So here in Psalms 55, what I wanted to come to, talking about the treaties and the broken treaties, all right? Psalms 55, and starting with verse 19, all right? It says, God shall hear and afflict them, even he that abideth of old, Selah, because they have no changes, therefore they fear not God. So that's what God said about America. America has not changed. People think that America has changed. America has only changed whenever it was forced to change by the people, all right? So whether that be a literal civil war to stop the slavery, whether that be the boycotts and the protests that stopped the Jim Crow era, or whether that be the people in the factory had to fight off militias just so they could earn weekends, just so they could have holidays. You see what I'm saying? Every change that has ever happened in America has been through force. America does not change willingly. All right. So it says, because they have no changes, therefore they fear not God. That's because the people here, whether you realize it or not, you may say you're a God-fearing American, but if you don't do what God says, then you hate God. All right. Some people it's because they don't know. Some people it's because they don't want to know. All right. Anyway, verse 20, it says, he hath put forth his hands against such as be at peace with him. He hath broken his covenant. He broke his agreements. He broke his treaties. That's another word of saying, right? Every treaty that was made with the American Indians was broken by the U.S. colony. All right? That's just facts. That's history. All right? That's what Thanksgiving is all about. It's about thanking God for killing the American Indians. That's what it's about. A lot of people don't want to admit that, though. A lot of people say, well, it's just time where we get together. Where are you at right now, bro? I'm at my house. Or I'm at my place. All right. I'm going to keep reading. Verse 21. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. Because they would write the treaty and then make it sound like, oh, we're going to give you this land. You're going to have all this land. And we ain't even going to touch it. We're going to stay on our side. Precepts. Yeah, I mean, you can type them if you stay up. Right now we're in Psalm 55. Not physically precepts. What do you? I don't know what you're talking about. Um, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. But anyway, um, yeah, you get me. You get me off track. Right? I'm just gonna have to like shut down the comments. But no, the U.S. would make a treaty with the American Indians, say, okay, we've drawn out your land on this map right here. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I'm in Psalm 55. Uh, So the U.S. would draw up the map and say, okay, we're not going to invade any of your land that we've drawn out here for you, as long as you side with us against your brothers over there that you've been warned, right? So it'd be that situation. And, you know, give it 10, 20 years, and the U.S. is already invading that land that they said they weren't going to touch. That's what happened in every case, in every single case, all right, when it comes to the treaties that were signed. At least through the 20th century, right? At least through at least through the 18 and 1900s. All right. It says the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. All right. So that's what happened with the treaties over here. All right. All right. So with that, let's go to talk about Gad just a little bit more. Let's go to Genesis, Esther 16. Oh, okay, yeah, that's in the Apocrypha. Let's see. For the wisdom of Solomon. Yeah, yeah, that goes with betrayal and things like that. But here in Genesis 49 and verse 19, it says, Gad, this is one of the tribes of Israel, Gad, a troop shall overcome him. All right, so it said a troop shall overcome him. That's the F troop. That's the U.S. cavalry is what that is. All right. A troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. Why? Because in prophecy, Revelation chapter 7, Gad will wake up as one of the tribes to have 12,000 mighty men of the Lord. All right. So again, on Gad in Deuteronomy 33. We hear about it. Deuteronomy 33 and verse 20. And of Gad, he said, blessed be he that enlargeth Gad. Right. So that's why Gad ended up getting all of the U.S. and continental North America, right? Because the Lord blessed Gad in that manner. Whereas Reuben, he gave him the Creek family of England. The Gadites got like 7 different families, right? Blessed be he that enlargeth Gad. He dwelleth as a lion, meaning very fierce, all right, as a lion, and teareth the arm with the crown of the head. Right? So that's it mentions the crown of the head as the like feathered crown. It's very unique, and it says teareth the arm with the crown of the head. The chiefs of certain tribes, whenever they wanted to have peace together, they cut the arm and do the handshake like that, and to represent blood. All right, so that's why I say he teareth the arm with the crown of the head. Verse 21, and he provided the first part for himself, the best part. The reason why Esau set up shop here in America when it comes to the West in general is that America is the best part. It's the first part of this land. All right, the best part. He provided the first part for himself because there, in a portion of the lawgiver, was he seated. Right. So specifically here in the U.S., Gad could manage the rest of the tribes that were south, right, and be as Levites, so all right, be as the priests, all right. Because from America, not only you got Reuben right there in Florida, but you also have. Let me do it this way. Y'all can say like that, like Reuben. You have like Reuben down here in Florida, right? And then you got all like Ephraim and Manasseh and the Caribbean and stuff like that, Simeon and the Caribbean. But over here on the other side of the U.S., you got Issachar to the south. And so the portion of a lawgiver needed to be in the U.S. area just because it was around it, right? Or at least that's how Gad saw it. Let me take this. Let me take the best part. And he came with the heads of the people, that would be Ephraim and Manasseh, heads of the people. He executed the justice of the Lord and his judgments with Israel, right? So that's why Gad was one of the last tribes to fall, right? Because South America fell a long time ago, right? Same with Mexico. But a lot of the Gadites, some of them never even get beat. They still got, especially out west, they got, of course, they made agreements with America to set up their tribal lands. They got a lot more than over here in the east, right? Of course, Gad did eventually fall, but it was some of the West didn't fall until like the early 1900s. Right? Like Geronimo was still fighting the turn of that century, right? And he didn't die until like 1921 or something like that. He had failed before then, but he didn't die until like 1921. So that tells you how recent these Indian wars actually are. All right. So when it comes to Thanksgiving, understand this. I'm going to read this here in 2 Thessalonians 1, because people might think that let me see how I want to phrase this. People might think that it's wrong to pray for the vengeance of the Lord upon the wicked. And that's not wrong to pray for it all, because all the wicked will be punished, and the Lord will deliver justice to those who need it, to those who have been wronged. All right? Judgment and justice will go through the earth. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. All right? So I got this here in 2 Thessalonians 1 and verse 6. It says, seeing it is a righteous thing with God to recompense tribulation to them that trouble. So it is a righteous thing with the Lord to recompense tribulation upon those who have troubled us. All right? He's saying the same thing as John said here in Revelation 13. And Revelation 13 is heavy because it's specifically talking about America. All right? So keep that in mind as we read this here. In Revelation 13, starting with 9, read verses 9 and 10. It says, if any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here's the patience and the faith of the saints. So he that leadeth into captivity, he who leads into slavery, must go into captivity, must go into slavery. All right, that's just the natural order of things. You reap what you sow. All right, it says, he that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. So America wouldn't have this land if it wasn't for killing the American Indians, right? So what does that mean? That means America has to be destroyed, not by the hands of man, but by the hands of God, and it will be destroyed, right? Come Judgment Day. All right. So the last thing that I want to touch on Thanksgiving, just to wrap it all up. All right. Here in Colossians 2 and verse 8. It says, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. See, that's Thanksgiving in a nutshell. It's the tradition of men. All right. Right? It's the rudiments of the world. Christ didn't establish Thanksgiving. All right. It was like, oh, well, I celebrate God on this day. So why don't you celebrate God on the Sabbath day, or the new moon, or the Passover, or on any day that he ordained? Instead, you're trying to make up your own holiday, man. That's like Jeroboam. He established the golden calves, and he said, look, we're going to worship on the 8th month, on the 15th day. And he made up his own feast to worship his own gods. That's what you're doing. You're not thinking the Lord God of Israel, the Lord God of our fathers, the Father of Jesus Christ. You're not thanking him, not on Thanksgiving. You're doing your own thing, all right? Worshiping your own gods that you made up. Worshiping the beast, white Jesus, all right? So, from there, I didn't want to spend too much time on Thanksgiving, because honestly, it's not worth it. It's, just one of them Hellenistic days that we do not serve on those days. What I do want to talk about is the Feast of Dedication, which is coming next Tuesday. It starts and it goes for 8 days. So it'll go into the following Tuesday. All right. So I believe it's the evening of this coming Tuesday, going until the evening of the Tuesday after that. So yeah, let's get that on the Feast of Dedication, because Moses, he's not the one who ordained the Feast of Dedication, like most feasts. Because most feasts that we celebrate were ordained in the days of Moses, but the Feast of Dedication is different. All right, it celebrates, and it's kind of a continuation of what we were reading last week, whenever we were reading about what the Greeks did to the earth. All right, they made it wicked. They multiplied evils in the earth. All right, right. But the Hasmonean family, or sometimes called the Maccabean family. They weren't putting up, they weren't tolerating the BS. All right. So we're going to start here with First Maccabees chapter 2, and we're going to jump in. All right. First Maccabees 2, starting with verse 1. In those days arose Mattathias, the John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Joram, from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. All right. So here's Mattathias, all right, the patriarch of the Hasmonean family, sometimes called Maccabean family. Verse 2. And he had 5 sons, Johanan, called Caddis, or John, called Caddis, Simon, called Thassi, right? That's where we get the term Hasmonean from Simon Thassi. 4, or this verse 4 rather, Judas, who was called Maccabeus, and that's where we get the term Maccabees from. That's where we get the term Maccabean family, is from Judas, who was called Maccabeus. Verse 5, Eleazar, called Abaron, and Jonathan, whose surname was Aphus. All right. So we got this whole family of priests who are zealous toward the Lord. All right. Verse 6, and when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, woe is me, wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city. Right. So this is Mattathias. He's looking and seeing what the Greeks have done to the world and to his land, to his people, and he's mourning because of it, because he knows it's wicked. He said, what does the world come to, right? The holy city to dwell there, when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hand of strangers. Her temple is become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets, her young men with the sword of the enemy. All right. So that tells you right there about the not sparing the old or the young, as the curses of Deuteronomy 28 said. Verse 10, what nation, hath not had a part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? All right. All her ornaments are taken away. Of a free woman, she has become a bond slave. All right. So listen to what Mattathias is saying. He's, look, my people were free, and now they become slaves to the Greeks. All right. Sound familiar? History repeats itself. All right. These priests and these Levites, as we know them in the Bible, we would call them Haitians today. All right. Or Papuans or Ashanti, depending on where you're at. Verse 12, and behold, our sanctuary, even our beauty and our glory, is laid waste, and the Gentiles have profaned it. All right. Verse 13, to what end, therefore, shall we live any longer? Then Mattathias and his sons rent their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn very sore. Right. So he's like, look, this is worse than death. This fate of having the enemies take over your land and pollute everything that you once held sacred, that's worse than death. That's what Mattathias and his sons are saying. All right. Verse 15. In the mean, while the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city Modin to make them sacrifice. Right. So while they're mourning and here in sackcloth, here come these officers that are Greek, trying to make the people, partake in the Greek customs. All right. And when many of Israel came unto them, Mattathias also and his sons came together. Then answered the king's officers and said to Mattathias on this wise, thou art a ruler and an honorable and a great man in this city, and strengthened with sons and brethren. Now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done. Yea, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain in Jerusalem. So shalt thou and thine house be in the number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and with gold and many rewards. So he's essentially asking him to sell his soul, right? Just do what the Greeks are doing. Just do what all the heathen have done. Profane the altar of the Lord, right? Sacrifice the swine's flesh. Just eat this pig, eat this pork, and you can be part of the elite. You can join the upper class. You can be one of the king's friends, all right? Verse 19, then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers and give consent to his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our father. God forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinances. So he stands up. He said, I don't care what you are. I'm only serving the Lord God of our fathers. All right. He said, look, I don't care if I'm the only person on the planet that does it. I know me and my house gonna do it. All right. Verse 22. We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, either on the right hand or the left. Now, when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which was that motive, according to the king's commandment. Which thing, when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. Neither could he forbear to show his anger according to judgment. Wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. So you have Mattathias giving his big speech about how we don't care what you say. We're going to follow God. It don't matter what you tell us. As soon as he's saying the speech, you got some other guys like, I'll do it, and steps up there and ruining the whole thing. This is ruining the whole speech, showing how wicked and sinful the people were at the time. All right. The Mattathias said, look, I'll kill you right here. I don't care. All right. He said, look, you're not profaning the altar. All right. And slew him upon the altar. Verse 25. Also, the king's commissioner who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at that time, and the altar he pulled down. Right. So all of this said, look, you're not profaning the sanctuary. I'll kill you upon your Greek altar. I'll kill this other Greek too. We'll fight against all this. All of this that's going against the Lord. We'll fight against it. All right. And the altar he pulled down. Verse 26. Thus dealt he zealously for the law of God, like as Phinehas did unto Zambri, the son of Salom. Right. So he's calling back to this says Numbers 25. Yeah, Numbers 25. When the Midianites came to the Israelites and started mixing with them and having their women to sleep with the Israelite men to catch us off guard. So yeah, he's calling back to another example of zeal shown from a priest of the Lord. All right. So all of that starts the what some people call the Maccabean Wars, where Mattathias and his family gathered together all the Jews, all the Israelites who wanted to resist the Greek ordinances, the Greek commandments, and that caused a whole big war. So we're skipping to the point of where Hanukkah comes in. This is First Maccabees 4. Where do I want to start? First Maccabees 4, and let's jump down because Mattathias died and his sons carried on after him as far as protecting and defending the land of Israel. All right. So Judas became the leader of the band of brothers because he was the most mighty. So First Maccabees 4, I'm going to jump down to verse 35. It says, verse 35. Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight and the manliness of Judas' soldiers and how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochia and gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he purposed to come again into Judea, right? So Lysias said, oh, this isn't over. You lost, you won the battle, but you won't win the war. That's Lysias being a Greek devil man. Judas, he's like, yeah, okay. He sent him away out of Jerusalem, essentially, right? So verse 36. Then said Judas and his brethren, behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and to dedicate the sanctuary. Upon this, all the hosts assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Zion, right? They went into Jerusalem. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profaned and the gates burnt up and the shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest or in one of the mountains, yea, and the priest's chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made great lamentation and cast ashes upon their heads, right? So when the Greeks took the temple, they didn't care. They didn't care about maintaining it. They didn't care about upkeep. They just put their gods in there and then left, right? Verse 40. and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew in alarm trumpets and cried towards heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profane, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it, wherefore they pulled it down. Right? So the heathen took the altar that was holy unto the Lord. They sacrificed like swine's flesh, all sorts of unclean beasts on it, to their gods. Right? So they had profaned the altar. They said, "Look, let's just get another. Let's just, throw this to the side, and we'll make a new one, because it's already profane." Verse 46, and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with the old altar. Then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the form. Right? They didn't bust down the stones or take a whole bunch of small stones to make an altar. You have to take a big one. All right, whole stone. And they made up the sanctuary and things that were within the temple and hallowed the courts. And they made also new holy vessels. And into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table, right? So everything, all new everything, right? And upon the altar they burned incense, and upon the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple, right? The menorah, the big menorah. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the month, of the 9th month, the 25th day of the 9th month. All right, that's what next Tuesday will be, the 25th day of the 9th month. All right, which is called the month of Caslu. In the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harp and cymbals. Right? So the same day, it had to be several years beforehand. The same day that the heathen had, profaned the temple and sacrificed the unclean sacrifices on the altar that they profaned. It's the same day, years later, that the Maccabees took it back. Right, so that's the day that we celebrate, the 25th day of the 9th month, and we celebrate for 8 days, as it's about to say. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold, and with crowns of gold, and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. Right? So all sorts of decorations, decking it out. All right. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. All right. So great gladness. They said, "Look, we ain't got to deal with the heathen no more. At least not profaning our temple." All right. Verse 59, moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year, by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Caslu, with mirth and gladness. Right, so 8 days every year, from the 25th day of the 9th month to, I guess it would only be 5 days till the end of the 9th month, and then it goes on to the 10th month for 3 more days. And that's what you see every year. You have you always have a new moon in the middle of the Hanukkah every year. Verse 60. At that time also they built up Mount Zion with high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down as they had done before. And they set their garrison to keep it, and fortified Bethsur to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea. All right, those Edomites. Who, I know that's talking about like the sect of Idumea that was still in the Middle East, but no, those Greeks were Edomites as well. So from there, let's go to Second Maccabees. It says the same thing, just as more of a commandment and not the history behind it. This is Second Maccabees. It's in Second Maccabees 1, I believe. I don't have it highlighted, which is really tripping me out because now I have to actually find it. Okay, yeah. Second Maccabees chapter 2, reading verse 14, and I'm gonna read down. It says, in like manner also Judas gathered together all those things that were lost by reason of the war we had, and they remain with us, right? So Second Maccabees was written in a way to condense or not even to condense, rather, it's more to give more detail to the stuff that you read in First Maccabees 1, or in the book of First Maccabees, rather. It says, verse 15, wherefore, if ye have need thereof, send some to fetch them unto you. Right, so this guy was writing the letter saying, look, if you need anything, then we got you. We got all the things that Judas won, the spoils of the people. All right. Verse 16, whereas we then are about to celebrate the purification, we have written unto you that ye shall do well if you keep the same days. All right. So what days is he talking about? Let's jump back to Second Maccabees chapter 1, starting with verse 18. All right. Therefore, whereas we are now purposed to keep the purification of the temple upon the 5 and 20th day of the month Cashley, right, the 25th day of the 9th month, we thought it necessary to certify you thereof, that ye also might keep it as the feast of the tabernacles. All right. So keep it as the feast of tabernacles, meaning for 8 days, with the first and the last day being the first and the last day being Sabbaths. I'm saying that for something that's happening off screen, not saying shoot for anything that's happening right here. What's happening. But anyway, right, the Feast of Tabernacles and of the fire, which was given us when Nehemiah offered sacrifice. After that, he had built the temple. Right, so keep it like the Feast of Tabernacles. That is for 8 days, as we read in First Maccabees chapter 4. So the whole point of this is to say we celebrate Hanukkah, not no Christmas, not no Thanksgiving, because those aren't biblical. Those aren't what Christ celebrated. All right. If you want to see what Christ celebrated in the winter months, this is the book of John 10 and verse 22. All right. Verse 22. And it was at Jerusalem the feast of the dedication, and it was winter. All right. The 9th month, it's winter. All right. That's why they call it November. No, it's the 9th month. All right. So in the 9th month, it was winter. Christ kept the dedication. He kept Hanukkah. He didn't keep no Christmas. All right. He didn't celebrate his birthday, even if it was December 25th, which it was not. He didn't celebrate his birthday because that's not a Christian thing to do. That's not a godly thing to do. All right. Just like celebrating Thanksgiving ain't godly. But guess what is? The Feast of Dedication. All right. As Jesus was keeping. Right. It says, and it was at Jerusalem, the Feast of the Dedication, and it was winter, verse 23, and Jesus walked in the temple and saw his porch. Right? So Jesus was there to keep the feast just like everybody else. All right. He kept Hanukkah. He did not keep no Thanksgiving. All right. That was all about the destruction of the ghettos. That's all Thanksgiving is about. All right.